Welcome to Reading Under the Covers, a romance novel podcast where we chat, fangirl, and maybe even swoon over our latest reads. I'm Francesca from Under the Covers BookTok, and today we are talking about something that's honestly hitting a little too close to home for me as a lifelong reader. This is one of those episodes that's going to be part love letter, part rant, and part reality check, because we are saying goodbye to something that has shaped not just how we read romance, but how we fell in love with the genre in the first place. And that is the mass market paperback. Yep, those chunky little books that you could just pick up for a few bucks at the grocery store, the ones that had the clinch covers, the stepbacks, sometimes chapter breaks, and they always tempt you to peek ahead when the tension got a little too good in the story. Now, these are the ones that introduce many of us to dukes and pirates and cowboys, Highlanders, even vampires and shifters, all the bad boys with a heart of gold. They are now being phased out. And honestly, it feels like the end of an era for me. So in this episode, we're going to walk down memory lane through the history of the mass market paperback and its deep roots in genre fiction, especially romance. And we'll look at how things started shifting with the rom-com boom of the 2010s and how now even historical romance is moving to a new format. But we're also going to talk about who this shift leaves behind, because us romance readers, we read a lot. And switching to more expensive formats is not just a small change, it will actually be a big deal. So if you've ever crammed a few mass market paperbacks in your beach bag, lined them up like trophies on your shelf, or felt your pulse quicken with a beautiful step back, this one is for you. So let's get into it. So before we get too deep into our feels with this, let's just rewind for a second and talk about what the mass market paperback even is and why it was such a game changer. Now, mass market paperbacks first showed up in the United States around the 1930s and 1940s. They were small, affordable, they were printed on cheaper paper, the kind that turns that soft brownish shade if you leave it out too long in the sun. The idea was just simple. Take literature, genre fiction, pulpy stories, and make them something that you could literally throw in your bag and read them anywhere. You didn't need a fancy bookstore. These were just sold in drugstores, airports, gas stations, and that kind of accessibility, that's what made the format revolutionary. It opened the door for everyday reading, for people who weren't necessarily browsing the literary fiction section at an indie bookstore. And it wasn't just romance, it was also westerns and thrillers, sci-fi, horror. If it was plot heavy and bingeable, it probably thrived in the mass market paperback format. And most importantly, for women especially, it made reading feel both private and public. You could take your book on the bus, on your lunch break, on vacation, and that compact size meant it was easy to hold in one hand and you could still devour them in a day. So once mass market paperbacks were everywhere, it didn't take long for one genre to completely take over, and that was romance. Romance thrived in the mass market paperback format. We're talking entire bookstore sections, spinning racks in every grocery store, aisles at Walmart just overflowing with the dukes and the pirates and the cowboys and the vampires. If you grew up reading in the 80s, 90s, or even the early 2000s, I can pretty much guarantee that your first romance was a mass market paperback. Let me ask you, did you ever sneak a romance book off of someone's nightstand? Maybe it was your mom's, an older cousin's, one of those books you definitely weren't supposed to be reading at that age, but you did anyway, because it was also priced accordingly, and conveniently, because oftentimes they were right next to the checkout. Now, you didn't need to be rich, you didn't need a Kindle, of course at those times they didn't exist yet, you didn't need to go to a bookstore, you just needed the curiosity and a few crumpled bills. Now, for the publishers, this was a gold mine at the time, and authors like Nora Roberts, Johanna Lindsey, Julie Garwood, Lisa Kleypas, Beverly Jenkins, all of them built empires on the mass market paperback sales. These books were just everywhere, and they came fast. There were monthly releases, sometimes even more than that, and readers could just binge a whole series, collect them like candy, and build little libraries at home. It was also a format that worked perfectly for the kinds of stories that romance tells. They're emotional, escapist, and character-driven. They are meant to be consumed in one or two sittings, like a box of chocolates that you definitely didn't mean to finish all at once. And the art in them was stunning. Oh my god, of course, the clinch covers, but the stepbacks, the foil lettering. There's an entire visual culture around historical romance in particular that only existed because of the mass market paperback. You knew what you were getting just from the cover, and that was part of the fun. And I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like there was this status of having the full run of an author's backlist, especially when all of the spines match in this beautiful rainbow of jewel tones, just beautiful, adorable. So yeah, mass market wasn't just a format, it was the format for romance. It really shaped not just how we read, but how we loved the genre as well. But like with everything else in publishing, things change. Mass market paperbacks started to decline in the 2020s. Slowly at first, of course, with fewer titles coming out, smaller print runs, less shelf space in stores, and then it all at once dropped. By 2024, mass market paperbacks made up just 3% of all book sales, and ReaderLink, which distributes the bulk of the mass market paperbacks to places like Walmart, Kroger's, and airports, announced that they are done with the format after 2025. And publishers, they are not fighting to save it. Why? There's probably a few reasons. Mass market paperbacks have razor-thin margins. The books are cheap, the paper's cheap, and if they don't sell, they get stripped and returned. That's a lot of waste, a lot of loss, and not a lot of profit, especially when paper and shipping costs keep going up. But also publishers have a new buyer in mind, which in my opinion is the BookTok buyer. So what we're seeing now, especially in traditional publishing, is a full shift to trade paperbacks as the new standard. Historical romance, which used to be almost exclusively mass market paperback, now it's being published in trade. Even authors who built their careers on mass market are seeing their new releases come out in a larger, pricier format. And that's a big deal because while trade paperbacks might be better for Instagram, they're not always better for readers, especially when it comes to romance readers, because let's be honest, we don't just read a book or two a month. We read 5 or 10 or 15. And if every book is now $16.99 instead of $7.99, then that's going to add up fast. So here's the part I think we really need to talk about. This isn't just a conversation about book sizes, it's about access and about who gets to be part of the romance reading community moving forward. Now, romance readers are not like other readers. I think most of us read a lot, so we are what the industry would call power readers. When a book that used to be $7.99 becomes $17.99, that's not just a couple of extra bucks, that's going to be the difference between reading 5 books a month or maybe just being able to read 1. And who does that leave out? A lot of younger readers who are just starting to explore the genre, students who are on a budget, disabled readers on fixed incomes, international readers who already deal with higher prices and limited access, and honestly just regular people that are trying to read more without blowing their entire paycheck on an author's backlist. We already know that romance doesn't get the same respect or critical attention as other genres do, and now the one format that made it truly accessible, the one that met people where they were, is being phased out in favor of something that's more curated, more aesthetic, and to be real, more expensive. It's not just romance that's affected, of course. Specifically, some of the romance subgenres, they thrive on a series, on binge reading, and big character casts. They were all built on the mass market model. So now they're getting squeezed out of the shelves and out of sight. It's hard not to feel like the readers who made these genres thrive are being asked to either spend more or read less. And that sucks, because romance has always been a genre of comfort and joy, of escape, basically saying that you deserve to fall in love again and again without worrying if your budget can handle it. So let's talk about how we got here. How we went from mass market being the format for romance to trade paperbacks dominating the shelves. I think it started quietly in around the mid-2010s. Romance was having a bit of a makeover. The rom-com was back. It was flirty, fun. Think like The Hating Game, The Kiss Quotient, The Wedding Date, Red, White, and Royal Blue. And with those books came a new kind of cover as well. They had bold fonts, flat illustration, just sometimes silhouettes, pastel backgrounds, and sometimes a cute dog or some baked goods. It was romance, but very Instagram friendly. And in fact, I had recently a chat with Erin from Berkeley Romance, and we did talk about the rom-com renaissance and the book as object, which is what shifted the conversation around the covers and how a lot of these things are marketed. I will leave that link down in the comments if you want to check it out. But guess what? All of these changes actually worked. These books were flying off the shelves, especially in places like Target and Costco and a lot of indie bookstores that had never really stocked romance before. So the publishers saw all these sales and they just doubled down. Suddenly, even authors who used to write steamy contemporaries or some emotional books, they were being rebranded with illustrated covers and lots of quirky titles. But here's the thing, those books were not being published in mass market. They were coming out in trade paperback, that larger and more expensive size that we talked about. And that was the beginning of the shift. Then BookTok entered the chat and romance exploded on TikTok. But because most of the TikTokers were just blowing up the same kind of books, they were either those pretty trade paperback covers that you could find at Target, Barnes & Noble, on all the bestsellers list, or they were indie romances as well. But all of those were often trade paperback. And the publishers took notice of that. So BookTok essentially became the new gatekeeper of what was seen, hyped, and shelved. And once a few of those trade paperback romances went viral, that format became the blueprint. Even historicals now, which traditionally lived in mass market paperback, they started getting trade reprints with updated book covers, all of it so it better fit the BookTok aesthetic. And now don't get me wrong, I love that BookTok brought new readers into romance. I love that it made books go viral and gave self-published authors huge platforms, but it also set a new visual and pricing standard that doesn't work for everyone. And it makes you wonder, if a book doesn't look TikTok pretty, or how we used to say Bookstagram pretty, does it get shelf space or attention? It's one of those moments where the genre reinvented itself, but there was a cost to it. So now let's talk about the fallout, because not every corner of romance is going to be hit the same, in my opinion, by the death of the mass market paperback. Some subgenres are built for binging. They thrive on long-running series, on high-volume reading, and on a tight reader-author bond. And those are the ones that are going to feel this shift the hardest, in my opinion. At the top of the list, of course, is historical romance. Now, this subgenre lives in mass market, and for decades, it was the format. Nearly every Avon, Berkeley, and Zebra historical romance was $7.99 mass market paperback. And that made sense because readers were devouring entire family sagas and interconnected series, so you could buy 6 books for under $50 and read for a whole month. Now we're seeing more and more historicals that are released exclusively in trade paperback. They're pretty, yes, they're beautiful. They're also bulkier, they're more expensive, and they're often not shelved with romance, because I, in fact, was watching a video recently about someone making a case for how much she loves historical romance and how it's not getting published as much, and contracts are not being renewed for very popular authors, but she kept calling the genre historical fiction. And historical fiction is a separate genre. So a lot of times these things are even getting shelved in the wrong place, which makes them even harder to find. There's also fewer new authors that are being picked up in historical romance, and without that low-risk model of the mass market paperback, publishers are just going to play it safe, which means there will be less variety, less diversity, and fewer chances being taken on debut voices. Another one that's hurting is romantic suspense. Now, this subgenre had a long history with Harlequin intrigue, St. Martin's Press, Kensington, all mass market paperback heavy hitters. These books are very fast-paced. They're often part of interconnected police, military, spy series, and they are meant to be consumed in order and quickly. But without that mass market format, these stories are pretty much vanishing from the shelves, or they're just being priced out entirely. Some of these are shifting to digital only, which is fine for some readers, but for those who prefer a physical book, it's going to be a loss. Then there's paranormal romance and urban fantasy, which had a huge run in the 2000s, like the Black Dagger Brotherhood, Side Changeling, Mercy Thompson, Anita Blake, all started out as mass market and all deeply bingeable books. Many of the big series are still running, but the new voices, they're not being picked up as easily in print, or they're being published as trade paperback. So I feel that ecosystem that's going to allow readers to discover their new favorite vamps and shifters and demons isn't going to be there anymore. And outside of romance, I feel cozy mystery is going to face the same big struggle. Now, this genre has always been mass market paperback heavy. Think of your cat detectives, your Baker sleuths, your small town libraries, all solving crimes with their knitting group. All of that is mass market. And now with ReaderLink pulling out, a lot of these series are being discontinued altogether, not because they're not good, but because they're no longer profitable in the format that made them work. Now, trade doesn't always make sense for these genres. The margins are better for publishers, sure, but the reading habits, the needs of the reader are not always going to align. And to me, that's just the heartbreak of it all. The formats that are being prioritized now don't always fit the stories that we love. So where does that leave us? Mass market paperbacks are going to be fading out. It's not going to happen overnight, but by the end of 2025, we're looking at a pretty clear sunset. Reader links pulling out, the publishers are shifting priorities, and the format that built romance as we know it is becoming a collector's item. To me, that is bittersweet because on one hand, romance isn't going anywhere. The readers are still reading. We are still discovering new favorites, however that happens to be. But for a lot of readers and authors, the format will change everything for them. If you were raised on mass market, this feels, I think, like losing muscle memory of how you read, because that perfect one-handed hold, that crack of the spine that some people love and some people hate, those pages that are turning sometimes faster than you meant them to, but it's also about access and what kind of stories get told and who gets to read them. So what do? We have to adapt because romance readers always do, and maybe lean into digital when we can. Ebooks and audiobooks are now more accessible than ever. Kindle Unlimited has become a powerhouse for indie romance, and we have to support indie bookstores that are still carrying mass market while they can. After that, basically haunt the used bookstores and library sales and keep that step back legacy alive. All we can do is keep showing up, keep reading, and keep recommending, because here's the thing, romance isn't defined by a format, it's defined by a feeling, and that at the end of the day is not going anywhere. So that is it for today's episode. A little bit of publishing tea, a little nostalgia, and a whole lot of love for the books that made us readers. If you have a favorite mass market memory, whether that is a book, a series, a specific edition that you still treasure, I would love to hear about it. So come hang out, whether that is over on the blog, on Substack, on Instagram, on YouTube. Let me know what those are. And if you like this episode, consider leaving a review and sharing it with your book bestie, especially that one who is still hoarding those precious old school Lisa Kleypas like it's gold, because honestly, they are. Don't forget to find us on the blog at underthecoversbookblog.com. And if you're tuning in from YouTube, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any videos from us. And subscribe for free to our Substack so you don't miss any content that we post across all of our platforms. But for today, that is all I have for you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!